Hello, I'm General Colin Powell. Our nation is currently being tested both at home and abroad. For our brave troops fighting overseas, this test is bringing profound sacrifices. Many of our men and women serving overseas are returning with serious injuries, including traumatic brain injuries, or TBIs. Sometimes these injuries are obvious and they're quickly treated, but often brain injuries are not immediately visible. This makes them no less real. A TBI can affect the injured and their families for the rest of their lives. And not just those in uniform. Any of us can sustain a head injury, whether from a car accident, a sports injury, or a household fall. The good news is that we are learning more and more about the brain and its ability to heal. With proper treatment and rehabilitation, those with brain injuries can enjoy rich, full, and productive lives, and many are. That's why I encourage you to watch this documentary. Together we can increase awareness, we can foster understanding, and we can help welcome those who have survived a brain injury back into our families, our workplaces, and our communities. On behalf of the Defense and Veterans Brain Injury Center and the Survive, Thrive, and Alive campaign, I thank you for your interest.
I don't remember the car accident at all.
Car bomb blew up. It just hit me in the face.
I just started screaming, I'm hit.
Each one of us is susceptible to a traumatic brain injury.
A healthy brain weighs about 3 pounds, and it has 100 billion neurons.
By the year 2020, brain injury became the #1 public health problem in the world.
It's referred to as the silent epidemic.
I'm lucky to be where I am at all. The fact remains, I'm not how I used to be.
People can look at me from the outside and say there's nothing wrong with him, he's not disabled. But they don't know what's going on inside my head.
There never is really a point where you can't continue to recover.
The most important thing is for these individuals to have hope.
It's gonna get better. It's just a matter of time.
I remember the explosion and waking up on the ground a couple feet from where I had started, just thinking, I'm hit. I needed someone to come to my aid. Then I started thinking, man, I can't die because my fiance is gonna kill me. I'm Lance Corporal Grady, 20 years old, United States Marine.
In December 2005, Grady was injured while stationed outside Fallujah.
Lance Corporal Grady, unfortunately, sustained pretty serious injuries over in Iraq. He was involved with an IED blast, and as a result, he lost consciousness for about 5 or 10 minutes, actually several times in a row.
Now at the National Naval Medical Center in Bethesda, just outside of Washington, D.C., Grady's condition is stabilized, and he has begun his recovery. In addition to losing his right arm, Grady is being treated for a moderate traumatic brain injury. A traumatic brain injury, or TBI, is caused by an external physical force to the head, like a blow or an explosion, as opposed to an internal cause like stroke or aneurysm.
To think about how the brain works is to realize that the brain controls.
They're not being sent back to combat if they've had a head injury and potentially causing even more severe injury.
The military coordinates care for those with brain injuries through the Defense and Veterans Brain Injury Center, or DVBIC, headquartered at Walter Reed.
The Defense and Veterans Brain Injury Center is assuming an important role right now in this war in Afghanistan and in Iraq.
Dr. Warden is the DVBIC's national director and helped start the program back in the early 90s.
The emphasis has been in previous wars on penetrating brain injury, which is very important and very serious, but pretty readily identified.
Today, doctors are more aware of the effects of closed brain injuries and are striving to make sure TBIs are not overlooked when patients have other life-threatening wounds. Even with modern body armor and helmets, the widespread use of explosives has made TBI more frequent, and it is now considered the signature injury of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. The DVBIC network includes 8 medical centers, a system throughout the country that ensures continuity of care for active duty and veterans who have suffered TBIs.
What's possible through this system with integration of military veterans and also community reentry is that people can move through those various levels of care as needed.
After about 3 weeks at Bethesda, Grady has greatly improved, both physically and mentally. Over the next few months, he'll learn to use a prosthetic arm, and doctors will also be on the lookout for any continuing problems from his brain injury. His recovery.
Seeing Colonel Maxwell when he was here as a patient and seeing him now, I can see a big change and a big difference. Also looking at him right now, I see myself how I was a year and a half after my accident as well.
Sharp, now a leadership coordinator at McGuire, was also a patient here almost 16 years ago after a car crash in 1990 left him with a severe TBI.
When I was a patient here, I had great therapy here. I had a great experience at this hospital, so much so that I vowed to come back one day and work here.
As a patient and a therapist, Sharp has developed compensation techniques that help him negotiate daily activities that are second nature to most people.
I fight battles on a daily basis. There's a lot of deficits that I have that people can't see on the outside. I got a big problem with short-term memory, and I got a big problem with time management. If I start working on something, I lose track of time. I've learned to develop some techniques over the years to help overcome some of those deficits.
He now passes on these techniques to other TBI patients, like Maxwell.
I think he's doing very well right now. He's still struggling a little bit with finding some of the words that he needs to say, and he has a hard time with some of his vision, but hopefully today that'll give him some techniques and stuff that may help him, deal with that problem that he has right now.
As a career Marine and officer used to leading others, Maxwell now struggles with his new limitations.
You never get 100% normal, and it's very difficult. People have a very hard time notifying that there's anything wrong with me. So I go to McDonald's and I want to order a cheeseburger. I can't remember the name cheeseburger, and the other day, literally, I could not remember how to say French fries.
He has high expectations for himself and others, and that's been a big frustration because he doesn't feel like he's the Marine that he was. Although I see it every day when he goes and he talks to a younger Marine who's wounded, whether it's a brain injury or a missing leg. He's able to connect with that person and motivate them and lead them.
It really helped to meet Colonel Maxwell. He was an inspiration for us. To see that Dave went through this actual trauma and they're returning more to a normal life. It gave me hope. It was something that was really needed.
Melissa's husband, Mark, had a craniotomy to relieve swelling in his brain after an Iraqi car bomb sent his vehicle off a bridge.
I don't remember the accident. I've only been told bits and pieces of it. It was a vehicle-borne IED, went off, it blew up, and we went off a bridge.
For patients like Mark who require extended care, the next step is often a veterans hospital like McGuire.
When First Sergeant Shaler was brought here, he had fairly profound deficits that were consistent with right hemisphere brain injury.
Neuropsychologist Dr. Trevin Pickett has been treating Shaler as an inpatient for about 4 weeks.
Some of the deficits would include visual spatial problems, nonverbal learning and memory problems, real difficulties with faces and names.
Polytrauma wards like the one at McGuire are set up to treat brain-injured patients who need both cognitive and physical rehabilitation. Relearning basic living skills like cooking is part of Mark's therapy. On the menu today, brownies.
They look at, I think, the safety aspect of it more than the taste.
One of the things about Mark is that he's driven, he enjoys challenge, and he has not let the consequences of this injury slow him down. So it's never been a problem to ready him for the effort of rehabilitation.
Cognitive screenings help doctors assess how a patient is doing.
I have to be conscious to raise my left leg when I walk, to keep from walking with a limp, or to have my left foot.
One of the things that I noticed in the middle of the interview was that when I asked him about his memories before the injury, Mark very quickly became upset when he was talking about family members.
I can remember my son's birthday, key things, visiting friends here in the hospital.
We've done some education with him that his increased emotionality now is really a direct consequence of where his brain was injured.
An integral part of the recovery process is the support of spouses and family.
Mark and Melissa's relationship, having such a strong bond between them, it's critical in my view. It's one of the things that I see as such a protective factor for traumatic brain injury patients as they progress through rehabilitation and then they return to the community.
Milkshake and cheeseburger tonight?
Yep, milkshake and cheeseburgers tonight. Only if you're paying. Are you gonna pay?
I'll pay.
Will you pay?
I'll pay. If you brought my checkbook.
For Mark and Melissa, the next big step is a trip to Washington, D.C. for surgery to reconstruct Mark's skull, almost 17 weeks to the day of his injury.
Today I check in. I will have surgery. I will have the part of my skull put back in.
At the 3D Application Center at Walter Reed, a process called rapid prototyping helps doctors turn virtual images into prosthetics.
In many cases, as a result of trauma, the bone that you remove, you can't replace back. So the cranioplasty is the preparation of an implant that the surgeon then puts back in that area to seal the brain case and to provide the external contours that are necessary. One of the big problems with any type of head injury is not the external injury itself, it's the resultant swelling that causes as much trauma to the brain many times as the actual penetration. So when you go in to relieve that swelling and you make a large opening so that the brain can swell and not constrict and strangulate itself, it leaves a large opening that then has to be repaired. This is actually Mark Shaler. Here you can see the break in the bone at this point. Some below the eye here.
Using information from Mark's CT scan, Dr. Rouse is able to create a three-dimensional image of Mark's skull, including a sub-millimeter accurate measurement of the missing bone, which will be used to create Mark's prosthetic.
I'm not scared. I'm a little anxious, I guess. I'm ready to have it and get rid of the stent.
Moderate and mild head injuries or concussions make up the largest percentage of TBIs in the general public for both men and women. Sometimes referred to as the silent epidemic, concussions are often hard to detect or dismissed as insignificant. Most people are at risk for a TBI from a car accident, a fall, and, of course, while playing sports. Dr. Jeffrey Barth of the University of Virginia has been studying concussions since the late 70s.
We found that mild and moderate head injury is a significant problem. People that were in automobile accidents were having cognitive deficits associated with those injuries. Our problem became that we could not tell how well those people were functioning prior to their head injury, so we couldn't determine what the head injury was actually costing them.
To get a better understanding of the effects of concussion, Barth and colleague Dr. Donna Broshek study student athletes with a method called SLAM.
The SLAM methodology stands for Sports as a Laboratory Assessment Model. And this is where we pre-test athletes before they begin the season to determine how well they're functioning neurocognitively.
By using sports as a laboratory, we get the baseline test, and then we test people after concussion. We can track their recovery. It helps us understand what the recovery curve is like for milder injuries.
The injuries that are experienced are generally of the acceleration-deceleration variety.
The brain moves forward, it accelerates, and then it moves backwards, and then when the skull stops moving, there's a very rapid and sudden deceleration. So the brain essentially slams into the back of the skull.
The same thing happens in an automobile accident. When a person drives and hits something, they move forward and stop quickly. And on the battlefield, this is very similar to the blast injury, where there's a concussive blow near the person and that explosive force translates into what would be very similar to being tackled.
Within sports, their findings have changed the way coaches and athletic trainers assess and treat players.
At first, what you did with a person that came off the field with a concussion was ask them a few neurologically based questions. Do you have headaches? Do you have double vision, nausea, that sort of thing? And if you didn't, and you wanted to go back into play, you were essentially told you were good to go and let's get back on it.
Today, standards are stricter in college, high school, and even professional sports. Standards that can be applied to all mild and moderate head injuries.
I think that concussions are being taken much more seriously in athletics, and they're also being taken more seriously in our everyday lives and in our military.
Like many soldiers being treated here, Private DeMarcus Wilson was injured while stationed in Iraq.
Really, I don't remember anything, but I've been briefed on what happened. Basically, one day I was on a mission, and I was the gunner on the Humvee, and a bomb blew up, and it just hit me in the face.
When he came here, he basically was also tired of being in the system. He wanted to either be back with his unit in Iraq, or he wanted to be sent home. I mean, the last thing he really wanted was to participate in a rehab program.
Think about war. We have to recognize that injury is inevitable. But what we have to do is to plan to care for people once they are injured. We have to be prepared to intervene as early as possible on the battlefield. We have to be able to take that person to a rehabilitation hospital, and we have to welcome that person back in the community.
Stories of traumatic brain injury are as varied as those who suffer from it. For some, it is a lifelong challenge. But not every TBI has a lasting effect. Many who suffer concussions or mild TBIs will recover quickly and completely. Every day, experts are learning more about the brain and its ability to heal.
The potential for the brain to recover is being understood now in ways that it certainly wasn't being understood 10 years ago.
Awareness and education are key, and patients who know what to expect are much more likely to recover successfully and prevent further injury.
Helping the patients and families to understand what is ahead of them, I think, is probably one of the best things that we can do for them.
Joseph and Ashley Grady were married on Christmas Day in the hospital chapel just weeks after his injury, but still plan on a traditional wedding with family and friends.
We'll have our big wedding, and then he's going to decide whether or not he wants to stay in the Marine Corps.
Tim Maxwell continues to work through his frustrations by reaching out to others.
Tim thrives on visiting with the Wounded Marines. It's a huge part of who he is. It gives him a sense of purpose.
Mark Shaler's cranioplasty was a success. For now, he and Melissa are back in Virginia, where he continues to improve with outpatient therapies.
Not every day's easy. We just take it one day at a time. Until then, you know, just wake up and smile every day. Lucky that we have another day together.
For more information on traumatic brain injury and prevention, visit the Defense and Veterans Brain Injury Center at dvbic.org.